There's a quiet moment in life when you look at yourself, not with judgment, not with shame, but with deep honesty, and you realize something uncompromising, not because that version was weak, but because it was incomplete. And somewhere inside you, there's a pressure, a pulse, a whisper that says, someone sharper, someone calmer, someone stronger, someone unrecognizable compared to the past. You've outgrown the person you've been. It's time to become someone else now. Transformation doesn't start with motivation. It starts with a decision, a private vow, a shift in how you see yourself when the lights are off and no one is watching. That's why the Stoics were so feared and respected. They weren't loud, but they were undeniably transformed. They didn't beg life to change. They became the change Marcus Aurelius, writing in dim candlelight during a war, examining his flaws with gentleness and courage. Epictetus, once a slave, rising to become a teacher of freedom through internal mastery. Cleanthes, carrying water at night to afford his studies, reshaping his identity with every deliberate step. Their transformations weren't cosmetic, they were structural, quiet, deep, permanent, and becoming unrecognizable is not about impressing others. It's not about external validation. It's about evolving so profoundly that your future self wouldn't even recognize your past mindset. It's about choosing discipline over impulse, clarity over chaos, character over comfort. It's about deciding that your life is too valuable to live at the mercy of distraction, emotion, or environment. Stoicism teaches that you don't control life, but you control the part of you that meets life. And when that part upgrades, your entire world rearranges itself around the new you. History shows this transformation is possible for anyone willing to do the inner work. Look at Cato the Younger, who lived with such discipline and integrity that even enemies trusted his word. Look at Admiral James Stockdale, who survived captivity by applying Epictetus's teachings to his mind like armor. Look at modern high performers who cut noise, mastered their reactions, and redesigned their environments until their results became almost unbelievable. If you want to become unrecognizable, it won't come from wishing. It will come from rebuilding the foundation, your identity, your discipline, your inputs, your emotional responses, and your environment. Not overnight. Not dramatically, but steadily, like stone reshaped by water. So let's step into the first principle, the one that begins the entire transformation. 1. Train your identity, not your motivation. There comes a moment when you finally understand that motivation is a guest. It arrives when it wants, leaves without warning, and cannot be depended on to build anything meaningful. But identity is the house you live in. It's the floor you stand on. It's the quiet story you tell yourself every day, even when you're not aware of it. And here's the truth most people never discover. Your identity determines your actions far more than your motivation ever will. Stoic philosophy understood this thousands of years ago. Epictetus didn't teach people how to get motivated. He taught them how to become a certain kind of person, someone disciplined, focused, unshakable, responsible for their inner world. He believed that if you build the right identity, the right actions will follow naturally. And modern psychology on identity-based habits echoes the same thing. When people shift the story of who they are, everything else shifts with it. Behavior, consistency, habits, discipline, even emotional stability. Think about it like this. If you tell yourself, "I want to work out," the identity underneath is passive. But if you say, "I am someone who trains," suddenly your actions have a backbone. If you say, "I try to wake up early," it's a negotiation. But I'm the kind of person who respects my mornings is an identity. Identity makes the decision easier because your actions must stay aligned with the person you say you are. This is exactly how the Stoics built themselves. They didn't wait to feel like wise, calm, steady individuals. They acted like it before they felt it. Marcus Aurelius wrote reminders to himself, not because he was already perfect, but because he was shaping the person he wanted to consistently be. He didn't wake up motivated. He woke up committed to becoming the man he believed he should be. And the more he behaved like that man, the more natural it became. Identity is training. Training happens every day, especially on days when you don't feel like it. Think about athletes, writers, warriors, entrepreneurs, people who build remarkable lives. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on identity-based standards. You can see it in how they speak. I don't miss training days. I don't break my promises. I finish what I start. I am responsible for my own reactions. These aren't motivational quotes. They're identity scripts. They don't light a fire. They maintain a fire. And here's the part that changes everything. You don't need to feel like the future version of yourself to start acting like them. In fact, you won't. That's the paradox of transformation. People wait to feel confident before pursuing their goals, disciplined before building habits, calm before changing their reactions. But the Stoics would tell you, feelings follow identity, not the other way around. Act first. Emotion catches up later. If you want to become unrecognizable to your old habits, your old weaknesses, your old patterns, you must first become unrecognizable to your old identity. The identity of someone who procrastinates is different from the identity of someone who executes. The identity of someone who seeks comfort is different from the identity of someone who embraces discipline. The identity of someone who reacts emotionally is different from the identity of someone who pauses, breathes, and chooses. Identity is not what you say you are. Identity is what you prove through repetition. And the beautiful thing, identity can be retrained, sculpted, rewritten. You are not chained to the person you were yesterday. Stoicism rejects that idea entirely. You are the author of your internal narrative. Every action is a line in that story. Every consistent habit is a paragraph. Every breakthrough is a chapter. Imagine waking up and shifting the script from "what do I feel like doing" to "what would the future version of me do right now?" That one question can rebuild your entire life, because the future version of you, the stronger, clearer, calmer, more focused version, wouldn't negotiate with morning alarms, wouldn't drown in distractions, wouldn't collapse under stress. They would act. And when you act like that version today, even in small ways, you begin merging with them. Identity is not built by dramatic changes. It's built by quiet, repeated choices. The Stoics understood that character is shaped in the tiny, invisible moments, when you choose focus over comfort, discipline over impulse, clarity over chaos. And each time you choose correctly, you strengthen the new identity you're installing. There's something powerful in realizing this. Your future self is already watching. They're waiting for you to start living like them. Stoicism teaches that transformation is not a leap. It's a practice, a recalibration, a decision repeated until it becomes truth. And here's the simplest place to begin. Pick one identity shift and live from it today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. I'm the kind of person who finishes things. I'm the kind of person who controls my reactions. I'm the kind of person who chooses discipline over comfort. I'm the kind of person who protects my focus. Say it. act from it, repeat it, become it. Because once your identity changes, your entire life follows. You won't need motivation. You'll become the kind of person who doesn't rely on it, and that is the beginning of becoming unrecognizable. 2. Master the art of radical self-discipline. There's a moment in every person's life where they face a quiet, brutal truth. Your dreams don't care about your mood. Your goals don't pause because you're tired. Your future doesn't rearrange itself because you didn't feel like it today. And this is where most people lose themselves, not because they're incapable, but because they keep negotiating with their own excuses. If you want to become unrecognizable, you must step into a level of discipline that stops asking how you feel and starts asking who you want to become. Stoicism knew this long before modern psychology did. Epictetus said, "No great thing is created suddenly." What he meant is that nothing extraordinary grows out of comfort. Every transformation is built from the ability to act independently of emotion. The Stoics didn't worship motivation. They didn't even trust it. They trained themselves to do what needed to be done, especially when they didn't feel like doing it. That was the real power, action divorced from mood. Radical self-discipline begins with a simple shift. You stop being the employee of your emotions and start becoming the commander of your actions. Most people wake up and check in with their feelings like someone checking the weather. Do I feel motivated today? Do I feel ready? Do I feel inspired? Successful people don't check the weather. They build the structure. They act whether the internal sky is sunny or storming. Look at Stoic warriors and leaders throughout history. Cato the Younger practiced discomfort deliberately, wearing plain, rough clothing when others chose luxurious fabrics, walking barefoot through Rome to strengthen mental resilience, training himself not to depend on comfort. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was preparing his spirit for life's unpredictability. He understood that discipline is not punishment, it is preparation. Or think of Admiral James Stockdale, who survived 7 years as a prisoner of war by applying Stoic teachings to every moment. He couldn't rely on hope, motivation, or comfort because none of them existed. What kept him alive? Structure, self-control, mental boundaries, discipline so deep it didn't depend on the environment. When asked later how he survived, he said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story." Discipline is what allowed that faith to have a structure to stand on. Radical self-discipline means doing what you said you'd do, after the moment you said it in has passed. Anyone can commit when they're inspired. Discipline is keeping the promise when the inspiration dies. Most people sabotage themselves because they measure progress by emotion, not execution. They think, "I don't feel like working today. I'll start tomorrow." But self-discipline rewrites the script. Whether I feel like it or not is irrelevant. The action is the action. When you live like that, something remarkable happens. You stop viewing tasks as choices and start viewing them as identity. This is what I do, because this is who I am. Radical discipline is also subtractive. It's not just about adding effort, it's about removing the behaviors that weaken you. Procrastination impulse, overthinking, dramatic emotional spirals. The Stoics taught that you must strengthen the internal governor that stops you from acting against your own interest. When you control your urges, you control your outcomes. When you control your outcomes, you control your life. And here's the paradox. Once discipline becomes part of your identity, it actually makes life easier, not harder. You waste less time negotiating with yourself. You lose fewer hours to distraction. You stop battling your own resistance. You gain hours of clarity. You finally feel traction under your feet. Life becomes sharper, simpler, more aligned. Discipline doesn't kill your freedom, it creates it. It frees you from chaos. It frees you from emotional turbulence. It frees you from the old version of yourself who kept waiting for the perfect time to change. It frees you from regret, from inconsistency, from self-betrayal. There will be days when everything inside you wants the easier path. Days when your mind whispers, skip it. Days when excuses sound reasonable. Days when your comfort zone tries to pull you back into old patterns. Radical discipline is the ability to hear those whispers and move anyway. And when you move anyway, when you act without waiting for desire, you start to build a life that doesn't depend on luck, mood, or momentum. You build a life built on choice, on strength, on internal order. The Stoics believed the highest form of freedom was self-mastery, and radical discipline is self-mastery in motion. It's the art of doing the hard thing without waiting for a pleasant feeling to carry you. The art of choosing the future over the present. The art of becoming someone your past self could barely imagine. Do this long enough, and you'll wake up one day and realize something astonishing. Your old self couldn't survive the life you're living now. You've become someone unrecognizable. 3. Cut out the noise and drastically reduce input. There's a moment when you finally realize that the world isn't just trying to distract you, it's trying to own your attention. And the scariest part? Most people hand it over willingly. They drown in notifications. They absorb strangers' opinions. They carry the emotional weight of drama that has nothing to do with their lives. They scroll through endless noise, never noticing that the scrolling is quietly shaping their character, their confidence, their identity. If you want to become unrecognizable, you must do something almost no one is brave enough to do. Cut the noise. Reduce input so drastically that your mind becomes something rare in this generation, quiet and focused. Stoic philosophy warned about this long before smartphones existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the need to cut away unnecessary thoughts and guard the mind from what weakens it. He lived in an empire filled with politics, gossip, pressure and chaos. Yet he carved out mental silence. He trained himself to withdraw into a private space of clarity, no matter where he was. That's why his decisions carried such weight. A noisy mind cannot lead. A noisy mind cannot grow. A noisy mind cannot transform. Modern neuroscience now confirms what the ancient Stoics felt intuitively. High input destroys your ability to think deeply. Constant stimulation rewires the brain to seek novelty instead of understanding. The more noise you consume, the more your attention fractures. And when attention fractures, identity fractures with it. You stop knowing what you want. You stop hearing your own intuition. You stop recognizing your own voice. If you think your life lacks direction, ask yourself one question. How much noise have you allowed into your mind? Transformation always begins with subtraction, not addition. Most people try to fix their lives by adding more habits, more tasks, more goals. But the people who truly change, the ones whose transformation becomes unrecognizable, start with removal. They cut what drains them. They cut what confuses them. They cut what distracts them. They cut what keeps them stuck in cycles that feel familiar but lead nowhere. This is why many of the most powerful thinkers in history embraced silence. Leonardo da Vinci would spend long hours alone, observing nature. Seneca warned that life is long if you know how to use it, but most people lose it in distractions. Even modern innovators like Steve Jobs practiced extreme minimalism, not for aesthetics, but for mental clarity. They understood that the mind becomes sharp when the world becomes quiet. Noise comes in forms people underestimate. Digital noise, constant scrolling, endless videos, addictive dopamine loops. Emotional noise, dramatic people, conflict hunters, gossip circles. Mental noise, overthinking, spiraling, comparing yourself to everyone. Environmental noise, cluttered spaces, chaotic routines, disorganized environments. Cutting noise is not isolation, it's filtration. You're not closing yourself off from the world, you're choosing what the world is allowed to place inside your mind. When you reduce input, you begin hearing something that's been drowned out for years. Your own thoughts, your values, your direction, your real ambitions, not the ones society told you to want. The silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, you finally see the version of yourself you're meant to become. And there's something else, something subtle but life-changing. When you stop consuming noise, you start producing clarity. Instead of reacting to everything, you begin to create. Instead of absorbing gossip, you start absorbing truth. Instead of comparing yourself to others, you start comparing yourself to who you were yesterday. Instead of rushing, you start choosing. Instead of living in other people's stories, you start writing your own. A quiet mind is a dangerous mind in the best way possible. It becomes focused, strategic, and emotionally stable. In a world where everyone is overstimulated and overwhelmed, calmness becomes a superpower. People will look at you differently, not because you changed your appearance, but because you changed your energy. You'll become unrecognizable not from noise, but from the absence of it. Cutting noise is uncomfortable at first. Silence exposes things you've been avoiding. It forces you to confront your own thoughts without distraction, but this discomfort is the doorway to transformation. The Stoics used silence as a forge, heat, pressure, clarity. When you strip away the noise, what remains is your true potential. Imagine waking up with a mind that isn't already exhausted. Imagine making decisions without the influence of comparison. Imagine creating goals from your own inner compass instead of society's outer pressure. Imagine hearing your intuition again, loud, clean, unmistakable. This is what happens when you drastically reduce input. The world will tell you you're missing out, but the truth is, everyone else is missing out on themselves. 4. Build emotional control instead of reactivity. There's a moment in your life when you finally recognize that the most powerful person in any room is not the loudest, not the strongest, not the most confident looking. It's the one who is calm, the one who doesn't react instantly, the one who hears, observes, processes, and then responds with intention. Emotional control is one of the rarest skills in the world, and it is the dividing line between the person you used to be and the person you're becoming. If you want to be unrecognizable, this is where the transformation becomes visible. Stoic philosophy has always been brutally clear about this. Your reactions create your reputation, your reality, and your future. Epictetus said, "It is not things that upset us, but our judgments about them." And modern psychology agrees. Your emotional interpretation, not the event itself, shapes your life. This means something revolutionary. If you learn to control your interpretations, you control the impact life has on you. Think about Marcus Aurelius. He was the most powerful man of his time, yet also the most inwardly disciplined. As emperor, he faced betrayal, war, illness, loss. But he wrote to himself every morning, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." He wasn't telling himself this because it was easy. He was reminding himself because the stakes were high. The survival of his empire depended on his ability to stay calm when others panicked. His emotional control wasn't theory, it was strategy. Contrast this with the average person today, constantly triggered, constantly overwhelmed, constantly pulled into emotional reactions by strangers on the internet, toxic relatives, stress, disappointment, or insecurity. In a world addicted to outrage, calmness is not passivity. It's power, it's clarity, it's superiority over impulse. Emotional reactivity is the enemy of growth. When you're reactive, you lose your center. You hand over your power. You become easy to manipulate. The Stoics knew this, which is why they trained themselves to pause before reacting. That pause, 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, becomes the difference between repeating an old life or stepping into a new one. Reactivity destroys relationships. Reactivity ruins opportunities. Reactivity turns small moments into big problems. Reactivity traps you in the same patterns that keep you stuck. But emotional control turns storms into tests, criticism into feedback, triggers into mirrors, conflict into strategy, and challenges into personal evolution. Look at Admiral James Stockdale again. His survival in captivity wasn't luck. It was emotional mastery. He refused to allow fear to break his mind. He refused to give in to panic or despair. He learned to observe his reactions, regulate them, and choose his internal narrative. That's Stoicism in its rawest form. I decide what this means. Emotional control isn't suppression. It isn't pretending you don't feel something. It isn't burying anger or denying sadness. That destroys you from the inside. Emotional control means you feel, but you do not obey every feeling. You observe the wave, but you don't drown in it. You acknowledge the impulse, but you choose the response. Imagine this: someone disrespects you. A reactive person explodes or collapses. Someone criticizes you. A reactive person gets defensive or ashamed. Life throws something unfair at you. A reactive person spirals. But a person with emotional control, someone on the path to becoming unrecognizable, responds differently. They pause, they breathe, they observe the emotion like a separate entity. They ask, what is the wise response here? They choose clarity over chaos. They choose strength over impulse. They choose the future over the moment. This calmness becomes magnetic. People start treating you differently. They trust you more. They listen when you speak. They sense that your stability comes from the inside, not the outside. That stability makes you stand out in a world full of emotional volatility. Emotional control also rewires your identity. When you stop reacting, you stop being controlled by everything around you. You stop being the puppet of your own emotions. You start becoming the author of your life. You realize you are not fragile. You are capable. You are not overwhelmed. You are in training. You are not triggered. You are transforming. And the real transformation happens in the small moments, when you choose silence instead of arguing, when you choose patience instead of anger, when you choose logic instead of ego, when you choose depth instead of drama, when you choose to walk away instead of forcing your point. These tiny victories, stacked daily, turn you into someone new, someone unshakable, someone unrecognizable. Here's the truth. You cannot control the world, but you can control the way you meet it. And that one skill will change your relationships, your decisions, your opportunities, your self-respect, and your entire path forward. 5. Reinvent your environment to reinvent yourself. There is a quiet truth that hits you the moment you finally step back and look at your life from a distance. You are not just a product of your choices, you are a product of what surrounds you. Your habits, your thoughts, your emotions, your standards. They don't exist in isolation. They're shaped by your environment every single day, usually without your awareness. If you want to become unrecognizable, you must do something the old version of you never dared to do. Change the world you live in, so you can change the person you live as. Stoic philosophy understood this long before environment design became a trending concept in psychology. Seneca warned, "We become like the things we dwell among," meaning, if you live among chaos, you become chaotic. If you live among negativity, you become negative. If you live among noise, you become noisy inside. If you live among laziness, you adopt the pace of the slowest person around you. And the opposite is also true. If you live among discipline, you adapt to discipline. If you live among order, your mind becomes ordered. If you live among inspiration, ambition grows naturally. If you live among clarity, your decisions sharpen. History is full of examples. Look at the ancient Stoics. Zeno didn't become Zeno by accident. He placed himself in the Stoa Poikile, a place of philosophy, learning, and deep discourse. Epictetus didn't grow into a teacher of freedom while staying in the environment that enslaved him. He changed his surroundings, his students, his influences. Marcus Aurelius retreated into nature and into books, away from the poisonous atmosphere of Roman politics, to protect his clarity. Cato the Younger surrounded himself with mentors and thinkers who sharpened his integrity. Their environments were not random, they were chosen. Modern psychology says the same. Your environment shapes 80 to 90% of your behavior automatically, not because you're weak, but because the brain always chooses the path of least resistance. If your room is cluttered, your thoughts will be cluttered. If your phone is filled with dopamine traps, your discipline will suffer. If your friendships normalize mediocrity, your ambitions will shrink to fit the room. This is why people feel stuck, not because they're incapable, but because everything around them keeps pulling them back into the old version of themselves. Transformation begins when you stop trying to fight your environment and start redesigning it. Reinvent your environment, and your behavior upgrades automatically. Upgrade your behavior, and your identity changes naturally. Change your identity, and your life becomes unrecognizable. Here's the truth. Your environment is either training your future or preserving your past. If you want to evolve, your surroundings must evolve too. Start with your physical environment. Your room, your desk, your workspace, your kitchen. Everything either supports your goals or sabotages them. Small changes create massive psychological shifts. Clear the clutter. Clutter is mental noise. Remove what triggers procrastination. Eliminate friction. Create a dedicated focus space. Train your brain to enter work mode. Add cues that reinforce your identity. A book, a journal, a clean surface. Then reinvent your digital environment. Your digital world is your real environment now, maybe even more than your physical one. Remove toxic apps. Unfollow people who drain you. Reduce dopamine loops. Design your phone to be a tool, not a distraction. The internet is shaping millions of identities every day, without permission. Take control of what shapes yours. Next, reinvent your social environment. This will be the hardest part, because people often cling to what is familiar, not what is good for them. You don't need to cut everyone off, but you do need to rebalance the voice-to-value ratio in your life. Spend less time around those who discourage, distract, or diminish you. Increase time around those who push you to grow, think, reflect, and evolve. Even one person with high standards can transform your trajectory more than 10 people with none. And finally, reinvent your internal environment, the way your mind responds to the world. Create routines that protect focus. Create boundaries that protect peace. Create mental habits that stop self-sabotage before it begins. When you reshape your environment, you rewrite your fate. You stop waking up in yesterday's life. You stop being dragged by old triggers. You stop returning to outdated habits. You start breathing differently, thinking differently, behaving differently. You start becoming the future version of yourself, automatically. Most people try to change while everything around them stays the same. It's impossible. You cannot plant a new identity in the soil of your old environment. It will not grow. But when you reinvent your surroundings, physically, digitally, socially, mentally, something incredible happens. Your transformation stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like momentum. Change the world you live in, even slightly, and the world inside you will rise to match it. There comes a moment in your transformation when you look at your life, your habits, your thoughts, your reactions, your surroundings, and you suddenly understand the truth behind every Stoic lesson, every psychological study, every breakthrough you've ever admired. You are not becoming a new person. You are uncovering the person you were always meant to be. Transformation isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the tiny decisions the world never sees. In the moments when you choose identity over impulse, discipline over comfort, silence over noise, calmness over reaction, environment over excuses. These choices are small in the moment, but over time they carve a new shape into your life, like water carving stone. And one day, you wake up and realize you've stepped out of the old version of yourself so fully that you can't even remember what it felt like to think the way you used to think, react the way you used to react, or live the way you used to live. That's what it means to become unrecognizable. You stop chasing motivation because your identity now carries you. You stop battling your mind because discipline lives in your bones. You stop drowning in noise because you've become selective with your inputs. You stop reacting impulsively because you've mastered your inner world. You stop fighting your environment because you've redesigned the world you live in. This isn't temporary change. This isn't a phase. This isn't a burst of effort followed by collapse. This is structural transformation, the kind the Stoics lived, the kind psychology supports, the kind history remembers. Marcus Aurelius became unrecognizable not through glory, but through discipline and thought. Epictetus became unrecognizable not through freedom, but through mastery of the mind. Cato, Seneca, Zeno, all of them reshaped their lives from the inside out. And now you're doing the same. Because the minute you stop relying on feeling and start relying on identity, everything shifts. The minute you clear noise, your mind becomes sharp. The minute you control your emotions, your life becomes stable. The minute you redesign your environment, your habits align automatically. Transformation stops being a battle. It becomes a direction. And here's the most powerful part. The future version of you, the one you dream about, the one you admire, the one you're trying to reach, is not far away. They're one disciplined step away, one intentional choice away, one quiet moment of clarity away. Every time you act like that future version today, you collapse the distance between you and them. Keep becoming unrecognizable. One identity shift, one disciplined action, one clean boundary, one environment upgrade, one moment of calm power at a time. This is how Stoics transformed themselves. This is how modern high performers transform themselves. This is how you will transform yourself, until the past version of you becomes nothing more than a memory of who you used to be, and the new you becomes undeniable.